Awesome. Well, thank you all for showing up. Thank you, John Locke Foundation, for putting this event together. This has been a phenomenal experience. This is my first time at this conference, and what an honor to get to speak and present on my first attendance here. So it's been great. Really excited to present to you all today on this policies that we've been working on in both in Utah, but across the country. So the title of my presentation is Freedom at Work, Making Benefits Affordable in the 21st Century. We'll be talking about affordable benefits. So before I dive into it, my name is David Iglesias. I am the Deputy Director of State Government Affairs for the Libertas Institute. So while our organization does a lot of work focusing on Utah state policy and focusing on the legislature there, my job is to take our more innovative policies that we've ushered across the finish line and help work with partners across the country to bring those similar initiatives to their backyards. And uh, it's been a really fun experience. We've got a great relationship with John Locke. I know we've worked on some other issues in the past, like sandboxes. So it's exciting to get to come back and talk about another new policy with you. So um, the topic of today's discussion really focuses on independent contractors, 1099 workers, and the self-employed at large. So before I dive into it, I want to ask everyone by raise of hand, do any of you know someone who is like a 1099 worker themselves or has engaged in some sort of like gig work or contract-based labor that's self-employed? So all of you raise your hand. How many of you are that person or in that camp where you are a contract worker? Well, there's a few of you. Okay, perfect. So, as you all, I'm sure, are aware, the big trade-off that self-employed, contract-based, 1099 folks face is when they go into that space of being independent and they want to work on their own schedule and they got that flexibility, they're giving up a lot of these benefits that they find traditionally in typical workplace environments of like employer-employee relationships, W-2 status. So, uh, what we've done is we have been working on a way to bridge that gap so that the independent workforce can actually have an opportunity to start getting those benefits that they otherwise don't have. Before I dive into the actual policy of portable benefits and such, I want to put a little bit of context together and kind of highlight some of the statistics that we've seen both around the country as well as North Carolina, as far as independent workforce goes. So, yeah, for this, uh, I don't think it's a secret. America's workforce is becoming increasingly independent. We're seeing a lot more folks, especially I think after COVID, there was an increase in the amount of remote work, but self-employment and really taking control of your own schedule and your work arrangement. So, according to 2023 Bureau of Labor Statistics, 7.4% of U.S. workers identified as independent contractors in their primary job. That translates to roughly 11.9 million American workers, or almost 12 million. Now, I want to focus on this part that says they're considering this as their primary job. So we're not even talking about contract and gig work as a supplemental form of income or these kind of side gigs, which is often the case for a lot of people where they'll try to fill in the gaps, make some extra income. But I mean, there's almost 12 million workers are considering this as their primary form of income. So that's a large group of folks that are potentially, in this situation. Now, to provide a little bit of nuance and clarity, not this doesn't translate to a one-to-one ratio where no one has these benefits that are in this situation, but a large part of that workforce uh, falls into that camp. So now that 2023 Census Bureau data showed that there were 30 plus million non-employer businesses generating $1.7 billion in revenue across the U.S. And those leading sectors of revenue included real estate, construction, professional and technical services, transportation, warehousing, and retail trade. Now, if you think about this, those are the industries that you commonly will see independent or 1099 workers operating. So that's just across the U.S. I want to make this a little bit more specific to North Carolina since that's the theme of this whole event. So holds up data from the Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy, as well as the North Carolina Department of Commerce and Charitable Trust for some of this data. So, according to the SBA Office of Advocacy, they've put together a North Carolina snapshot of kind of the small business situation up into 2025. So their data show that there were nearly 915,000 North Carolinians were operating solo businesses with no employees. When you tally that up to the total number of small businesses that snapshot provides, that made up almost 83% of all those small businesses. Um, then, and those are a lot of those are the people that are falling through that benefits gap. Uh, and then the North Carolina Department of Commerce, we saw that there really is a huge entrepreneurship boom. There were, according to their data, 171,000 new business applications in 2023. That was up 64% from 2019, and that spreads across all counties. Yet most of these new entrepreneurs lack access to those benefits. And then small business created 90% of North Carolina's net new jobs in 2023 through 2024. But again, their workers disproportionately lack retirement savings, health coverage, and disability protection. That's according to the SBA office. Finally, the Q Charitable Trust reported that there's 1.7 million North Carolina workers who lack access to any employer-sponsored retirement plan, and the projected taxpayer cost of that inaction would be an accumulated 9.9 billion by 2040. However, they said that if households saved just $170 a month, that burden could be erased. So it's no secret that independent laborers, that self-employed folks, they make up a significant part of the economy in North Carolina. Uh, but they are also, many of those folks were falling through the cracks. So with that being said, their independence, as I mentioned, comes at a steep price. That is, they're being forced to make an unnecessary choice between benefits and flexibility, their independence. And that comes as part of a result due to the legal environment that creates uncertainty. Clearly, if a company wants to offer direct benefits, whether those are healthcare insurance or coverage, whether it's dental vision, that is evidence of an employer-employee relationship. Therefore, that would risk misclassification. What we're looking at with portable benefits is an innovative approach to bridge that gap. But even then, the current legal environment leaves a lot of uncertainty and a lot of risk for those businesses. So even if they want to, they have to be willing to take on those potential challenges to misclassification for providing a way for these workers to get benefits. And then with that being the higher risk, that means it's a higher bar of entry. So only few companies that are willing to engage in that are going to participate, which means less options for contractors and not as much competition in the marketplace as far as providers go, and just giving more opportunities for these workers. So that leads me to portable benefits. This is where we're talking about bridging that gap for those workers through this policy that we've been seeing across the country. Now I can jump into. I've mentioned portable benefits various times, so let me explain what exactly I'm talking. So these are benefits that are specifically for independent workers. They are tied to the worker, not the job, and that's a very important distinction that we try to help. We want people to understand, which is when they receive these benefits, it's not going to create a job lock situation for them. They're not going to be stuck with DoorDash. They're not going to be stuck if they're a truck driver that's contract based. They're not going to be stuck with a specific company or business they're going into business with. Allows them that flexibility to jump from job to job. So, and it's not just, a lot of times, like, people imagine gig work. They think DoorDash, Lyft, and that has been sort of up to this point the larger players in this space. But this applies to many more people. I mean, me personally, I am a musician. So a lot of musicians are contract based, they're session based. And so, if you're a musician and you were to have access to portable benefits, you could jump to a different job, like say you also truck drive. The idea is that those benefits will not be lost just because you're exercising the flexibility and independence. And then another important factor about these benefits is that they are flexible to the needs of the worker. So again, these are not direct benefits of healthcare that is decided upon by the businesses. This is this is comes in the form of monetary compensation that the worker can then use at their discretion, whether it be for paid time off, emergency, situations, healthcare premiums, retirement plans, you name it. The idea is that they can tailor those benefits to their specific needs, which is the whole idea of why they're an independent worker in the very first place, is because they value that flexibility. How does this actually work, though? So, if it's not a direct benefit, if it's not actual, healthcare premiums or coverage, how is it that they're able to do this? Well, what happens is the companies that they go into business with will contribute an additional monetary amount into a portable benefit account that is administered by a third party. And so that is how that account is attached to the worker. And so that allows them that portability. And these funds, mind you, both the workers can contribute into their own benefit accounts, but most importantly, these businesses that they work with are the ones that can make those contributions. And all those contributions are voluntary. That's another key component that we really try to stress here is this is not a mandate. This is not a requirement. So if the company, let's take DoorDash. If DoorDash decides that they want to offer a certain percentage back to those workers into this account, they can do so. But if they're offering that and the contractor decides it's not for me and I don't really want this, it's not my interest, they don't have to participate in it. They don't have to opt in. It's completely voluntary on both ends. And this allows them, again, to make sure that this is not adding an extra burden or cost to the businesses when they're considering going into a contract with these independent workers. Because that's another thing that we don't want to see happen is if you make these mandatory, if you make this a requirement, that automatically starts making it an added cost to work with contractors, making it less attractive to go into business with them. And that's the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. Now, how are these third party accounts administered? We actually have a couple examples. Before I jump into it, I want to clarify, I am not at all like representing these companies. I do not take any money from them. I'm not like, we simply are reporting kind of what their role is in all of this and how they function. And our hope is to see more. So these are kind of the leading two companies that we have engaged with or talked to. So first one is Stride Health. They administer a benefits savings account, and they also have a partnership with MasterCard to create a debit card that the worker then can utilize to go and purchase whatever services or products they need. But those savings accounts are also high yield savings accounts. So they want to keep money just sitting in it and accrue interest and grow that. They can't. That's part of how it's structured with Stride. Or they can take that card and go purchase whatever makes the most sense to them. The other provider that we've spoken with is RocketMed. So RocketMed is a similar idea in terms of how the platform that they're providing, but I believe they are tailored more specifically to healthcare. So what they offer is a pre-funded health card. It provides direct access to different kinds of healthcare, whether it's primary or urgent care, telemedicine, mental health or dental services, prescription savings, GLP-1s, labs, imaging, and more. And they also clarify as self-pay patients. So they actually already have a business model that operates for W-2 workers and part-time, and they already have this kind of in place with other companies. But what they're looking to do is basically, at the flip of a switch, turn this into the same framework into something that can be applied to independent contractors. And they are looking at doing this in Tennessee, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's through these kinds of companies that right now we're seeing this kind of take shape and take form. They will go partner with the businesses that the contractors are going into this agreement with. And it's through these intermediaries that they can get those accounts attached to their name and jump to these different jobs and maintain those savings. Up to this point, everything has been kind of conceptual, theoretical, like I've been describing the idea, but what does this actually look like in practice? So fortunately, we do have some, we do have real world examples. We have data that can show like what is this looking like over the last couple of years that it's been kind of implemented across different states. So since 2023, we worked on this in Utah. This was an initiative that we were excited to lead out on. We worked with the Utah State Legislature. We created the first legislation for this policy and got it across the finish line in Utah. And it was really exciting to see. And then since then, we've seen pilot programs and other legislative efforts unfold over the last couple of years. So what's the difference between the pilot programs and the legislative campaigns that we've been engaged in? So basically, the pilot programs are where DoorDash has come out and they are partnering with Stride Health in a select number of states to offer these for a limited time, these portable benefit account savings and contributions for a certain set of time to their dashers who qualify because of a certain amount of hours that they've hit or because they've generated a certain amount of revenue. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the criteria that's kind of between them. But that is providing real-time valuable data on where the money goes, how the workers use it, and how many people are actually engaging and enrolling in the program. Now, the limitations are it's not permanent because this is, where they do go and operate, it's a set amount of time. They will go and get governor approval. So in every state they've operated, they've seen the governor come out and say, hey, this is an exciting program. So it kind of gives them that reassurance that they can go ahead and operate. What we've engaged in Utah and in other states is legislative campaigns which are set to eliminate that risk. So the purpose of the legislation is to make it so that there is no legal gray area. There's no question about how businesses can engage in this. Because right now, technically speaking, companies like DoorDash are going and doing this, but it's limited and they're the ones that are willing to take that risk. There are smaller companies that, maybe they're interested, but it's just the trade-off between getting hit with misclassification laws is too great. So the legislation is very simple. What we did was clarify it. The presence of affordable benefits offerings does not shall not be considered as evidence of a employer-employee relationship. And that's it. That's the extent of it. The whole point is to create a safe harbor so then more permanent programs can unfold. And so more businesses and more contractors can start exploring a permanent sort of arrangement. So it's not just left to these kind of pilots. Now, I want to jump into kind of highlighting both of the sets of states that we've seen these different approaches unfold in. So we'll start with the pilot programs. So on the pilot programs that we've seen so far, taking place in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Maryland. We're going to talk about Pennsylvania and Georgia because those two have actually gone ahead and they've put forward reports that show the results of how this played out, how many people participated, what was the outcome, and where did the money go. Maryland, my understanding is that data should be made available soon this year. I'm not sure exactly when, but once it is available, we'll be sharing that information as well because it's been really, I think it's been really insightful for folks that are trying to wrap their heads around what does this look like and does it actually make a difference. So at the end of 2024, DoorDash, and again, this is just us doing research. I don't represent DoorDash. I have no association other than we appreciate the findings that they're producing. So at the end of 2024, they put out their findings in this report. It's publicly available. I'd be happy to share it if y'all are interested, like the links to the full thing. But basically, they launched theirs in April. My understanding is of April 24. It was a 12-month pilot. They had 4,400 dashers enrolled, which was almost a quarter of the total eligible drivers for their program in Pennsylvania. So it was a pretty good turnout. 4,400 was, I think, for a first initial pilot, that's a pretty good participation rate. Approximately 66 of the participants who didn't have access to benefits that they wanted or needed gained access to those benefits. 77% of participants felt more financially secure, and then 91% said they would feel even more secure if the pilot were made permanent. And then finally, 62% of participants now have interest-bearing savings accounts that they did not have previously. So pretty good outcome. These workers are really like seeing the value in it. And then when you look at the actual where things were spent, where the dollars went, uh, the top two categories were time off as well as emergency savings. And those were at looks like 32 and 21%, and then health related expenses tallied up altogether came in roughly at 10%, and then retirement savings 4%. I The other category, I'm not sure off the top of my head what that other category qualifies as, but I think the big takeaway here is that these are the exact types of offerings and benefits that they're giving up when they leave that W-2 situation, and they're filling that gap. So a lot of these workers are using their funds specifically for those areas that they're lacking in, and primarily, time off and emergency savings being the most important. I did see the hand raised for a question. She was about to get over categories. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Uh, so then if we jump over to Georgia, we will see, they put out their findings at the end of last year. Georgia and Maryland were both announced for 2025 pilots. So they had very similar results as what they found in Pennsylvania. This was a 6-month pilot from my understanding. And they had 5,500 dashers enroll, which was, again, close, but just short of a quarter of the total eligible drivers. Nearly 75% of respondents who did not already have access to those benefits they wanted or needed gained access to those benefits. And then 73% said they felt more financially secure, with similarly 91% saying they would feel more secure if those were made permanent. And then finally, 61% of respondents now have interest-bearing savings accounts that did not have otherwise. So 2 different states, but they had very similar outcomes. Maryland, we're hoping to see again soon, and I would imagine it's probably going to be a very similar sort of a experience that they have. So those are right now the real-time, limited data, but it is promising data that we've seen play out so far in these experiments. Now we can shift gears into the legislative outcomes and legislative side of things. So, like I mentioned, Utah was first in 2023. Following the 2023 legislation, there were 2 companies that came out in 2024 and announced that they were going to formally strike up a partnership with Stride to begin offering their contractors affordable benefits in Utah. So those were Shipt and Lyft. Lyft specifically came out and said they would be contributing 7% of an eligible Utah driver's quarterly earnings to help cover the cost of health insurance, retirement, and such. And as a result of the Utah legislation, 2 years later, we saw Tennessee and Alabama jump into the same space. So Alabama was a little bit unique. What Alabama saw were a couple factors that we thought were really interesting that made them stand out from the rest of the states that are working on this right now. And that is, they included a tax deduction portion of their portable benefits program. So basically what it means is that the hiring parties that are contributing can deduct up to 100% of those taxes. And then the workers can also deduct up to 100% from their income. So it's not, something that they're being taxed on. And this creates a little bit more of that parity when we're talking about actual like dollars and what they're able to use on these benefits. Whereas W-2, there's definitely advantages there at play, but this is something that Alabama was the first to do. Utah and Tennessee, they only focused on the safe harbor. And the reason is because the tax deduction portion, while it is exciting and interesting to see, and it does create a little bit more of an advantage and an incentive, oftentimes it'll cause a fiscal note. And so there are some concerns and questions, or they want to spend more time looking at that. Well, the primary focus of what we think is the key piece right now is that safe harbor, is making sure that these businesses and these workers even have the opportunity or the option to consider this. And then the tax deduction portion is something that is worth discussing and worth looking into. but it's not the primary objective, I would say, in the conversations that we've had. Um, and then in Tennessee, so they, oh, sorry. And then another detail about Alabama, they also had a full bipartisan support on this bill. They actually had co-sponsorship between a senator who was Republican and a Democrat who was uh, a representative. They got together, and I actually had the chance to talk to the representative who co-sponsors the bill and asked him like, what made you interested in this? Why were you willing to work on this, and what made this happen? Part of it was he has family that is contract workers, and so he saw the importance of this kind of policy and bridging that gap. He also saw and took notes on the impact of I think it was AB 5 about California that did a lot more focusing on the turning these workers into employees, treating them as such. And so he saw that there was really a need to create this voluntary alternative. And then Shipped is also headquartered in Alabama. So Shipped actually, while they were one of the first to launch a pilot in Utah, they're headquartered in Alabama. So they were very quick to come out and say, "Hey, we want to work on this. We really are interested," because that's where they have a larger base. So they began offering up to 4% of their pre-tip earnings of the sorry the Shipped shoppers were able to qualify up to 4% of their pre-tip earnings. Uh, are y'all familiar with Shipped? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. They're owned by a Target, like the retail company. So it's basically like my understanding is DoorDash, but like for groceries. So Tennessee, they passed similar bills as well, 2025. They recently, I have been having conversations with folks over there. RocketMed is actually looking into helping some of the roofing companies in Tennessee explore how to take advantage of the new law so that they can create a little bit more retention among their contract laborers in the construction industry. So that's currently underway. Uh, it's only been a year, not even a full year since the Tennessee and Alabama bills were passed. So it's still kind of early implementation, but we're seeing interest already generating. And then in Utah, I recently had conversations with some folks representing the Truckers Association and the Realtors to start kind of helping them understand and like because I think part of the challenge when we first launched this in Utah was just helping out folks understand who all is eligible for this. It's not just gig workers, but the 1099 basic. So a lot of promising initial movement, and it's still very young. And then since then, uh, we've had ongoing legislative efforts through this year. At the end of last year, there was a federal bill that was introduced into the House of Representatives by Congressman Kevin Kiley. So this is doing the same thing on the federal portion because the difference between the legislation is the state legislation we've seen is addressing the state labor laws and saying that the state of X will not consider this as a employer-employee relationship. The federal component does the exact same thing on the federal labor side of policy. Right now, the current administration is seemed like they're a lot more friendly and welcoming to the independent contractor type of work. So there hasn't been any concern as far as where we've seen portable benefits at play. We've not seen any federal consequences or backlash for engaging in this. And then currently we've got bills, and this is already outdated this year. So since I put this all together, we've had one or two, maybe three bills that have been introduced, but those were in Idaho, Wyoming, Mississippi, Georgia, Kansas, Florida, New Hampshire, and West Virginia. And then the newer ones, I believe Louisiana. I think it was Louisiana, and then Kentucky also recently just joined that list of states working on these issues. So a lot of state legislatures are seeing the value and seeing the need to start considering this as a solution for their growing independent workforce, so that they don't fall through the gaps. I think one thing that came to my mind as we were talking about like a bunch of different topics through this conference, we were talking about the subject of 250th anniversary of our independence, and what more amazing time to look at independence than in the workforce because our labor movement is moving in that direction. And so I think it's becoming very clear across the country that this is something that needs to be addressed one way or the other. So the final kind of wrapping up on all the slides and everything, I think one of the important questions to ask is, what do workers actually think? Because this is a great sounding policy, and we can pass policy and we can run pilots, but what do workers actually think, and do they value these programs? Well, Mercatus Center put together, they did some research and they found that 80% of independent contractors walk portable benefits while remaining independent. So that to them, this is important that they maintain that flexibility and they don't give up that status as an independent contractor. And so getting these portable benefits should not come at the expense of that independence for them. And really at the core of this, we're trying to bridge this gap. It's not about reclassification. I think that's one thing that often will get misconstrued or some people can get confused about. We're not redefining what a contract worker is. We are not trying to categorize a new group of people and add them into this camp of 1099 workers. In fact, the bills that have been considered across the country follow the state, like the existing states, independent contractor or independent laborer definition. So there's nothing being redefined. It's simply it's recognizing one group of folks that don't have these opportunities and saying, "Hey, let's bridge this further." Um, and then I pulled some quotes from folks across the country in different pilots in different areas. So one of the shift shoppers, uh, her name was Vindy. She's from Utah. There's a whole video spotlight that Shift put together when they were highlighting the work that they're doing in Utah. They were interviewing her, and she said that the flexibility to be there to make dreams come true for her family was just wonderful. Um, a woman named Stacy, who was part of the Pennsylvania pilot, said that she's the only one working, so this was a huge deal for her and her family. And then someone, it was an anonymous, and there's more. You can go to the reports, and they'll have different quotes and sharing different stories. But someone said, "I would hope the program makes a permanent comeback." And so Georgia, they had their pilot, it ran its course, and now there's legislation being considered that would permanently open this door so that there's, they can, it's not just a one and done kind of scenario. So the last portion I think, is interesting to highlight is, what does the public think? And so our team, we did a survey, or we did a poll of 1,200 registered voters across the country. And we asked them a variety of questions, some fun, some lighthearted, some more serious. One of those questions was, do you think gig workers should have access to portable benefits? And 61% said yes, they should. So, and then you got 21 said no, and 18 that said unsure. I would imagine that 18% just didn't understand or weren't aware of like what is portable benefits. It's relatively new. So I think the big takeaway here is that, workers value this. They see that this is something that gives them a lot of opportunity. It's closing that gap for them. Companies are willing to engage in it. You don't have to mandate it. There's already businesses that are exploring these options, because as soon as one business is doing it, like if you take DoorDash, Lyft, and Uber, well, if one of them starts offering it, and then the others don't, well, that's the edge that they're going to have on all those for those contractors. They can say, "Hey, if you come work with us, we'll give you the standard rate or whatever, competitive rate, plus you can open an account with us." Whereas, those other companies, if they don't, then they're going to be losing out on that edge. And then, the public supports this policy. I think everyone across you know, the different sectors, everyone is seeing that this is something that workers really would benefit from. So I just spoke at you guys for an extended amount of time for a bunch of information. Uh, I'm happy to, stop there. If there's any questions or anything, please feel free to throw those at me. I mean, uh, I hope that I was able to explain kind of the concept clearly, but I don't know if there's any questions. Please feel free to ask away. Let's go in the back, and then Nick.
Objections to this legislation, and who monitors to ensure advisors spend on all expenses?
Yeah. So great question. Um, so the objections would be, we've seen really, I think, aside from a lack of understanding of like how these work, The objections have mainly been from, I think, union labor. Like Eves don't really like it because it's not necessarily incentivizing unionization. They have actually, I've heard some folks, not necessarily unions, but I've heard legislators and ask the question or express the concern about, are you decreasing the amount of W-2 workers and increasing the 1099 workers? We haven't seen that happen. I think Mercatus is doing some research on that should be available soon. That actually shows like this doesn't, where we've seen portable benefits happen, there's not a decrease or this kind of, concern that they're thinking. And then who monitors? I think so. That's a very valid question. Part of that is the companies that so like Stride and Rocket Bed, when they open these accounts with the workers, there are, definitions of where that money can be spent and where it's supposed to go. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what agency or what, uh, I guess regulatory body would be overseeing that direct, like where those dollars were spent. I think the IRS would probably be tracking like, okay, if they're spending it over here, does that need to be monitored or such? But I apologize. I don't have as good of an answer for that second part of the question, but I hope that helps.
If I were to guess, it would probably be that the company's supposed to keep up with it, that they are subject to audit by it.
Yes, I believe that would be the primary case for the company's ends of things.
This is pre-tax money.
My understanding is yes, it should be used legally.
Yeah, so I guess
Was the N99? It's all pre-tax. Right. Yes, I believe it's trying to off the top of my head. I'm trying to recall that one. I think I'll have to get back to you and follow up with you on that one. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah. So you talked about Uber and Lyft and shit. Like these are like the major these companies have hundreds of thousands of people. What about the small to medium sized business that's got like two contractors? What is their incentive for them?
Yeah. I think, when it comes to wanting to grow and show that they do, uh, there is a benefit to benefit being pun intended, benefit to go into business with them. I think this does make an attractive form of, incentive, I guess you could say. Uh, I think, it obviously it's easier for the bigger companies to engage in it. But I think the more that we see this evolve and the more participation from providers and such, there will be other alternatives and more opportunities that I think will bring an incentive for the smaller businesses. And I think also, depending on if the state passes the tax deduction portion, that is also, an incentive for businesses of any size, I would say. So, um, I don't know if there's any other off the top questions or concerns, or if this even makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, you feel free to be like, I don't understand this. You're not getting through to me. If not, I mean, I'm happy to like connect with anyone afterwards. I'm happy if we have a booth outside with more material. If this is something that you think is interesting and worth exploring, would be happy to chat. But do you have a question?
Is this happening abroad?
Not that I'm aware of. Like outside of the U.S., I have not seen. Not that I'm aware of that they're doing this anywhere else. Yeah.
suppose somebody's working in the construction business. This happens a lot in construction business where you work on one building with a contract that's going to offer this benefit the next season you're in with another contract that's not going to offer this. And so you're not getting a set of payments into it. What happens to this benefit? They just mothball it until the next time that work with a contractor, then okay, or they just kind of spend it down slow.
Right. So I think, it depends on the structure. So like in Stride, they have a high yield savings account. So some of those cases it will generate. But if that one company stops contributing, then yeah, there's no one other than the worker themselves that would be putting into it until they find a new company that's going to be willing to put into it. We've talked about, I can't say for certain, how this all would play out, but there has been conversations about making it even easier so that anyone, like if they have family, they have friends, or like
If someone wants to contribute into that account, they can. I don't know that the current legislation prevents that where it's been passed. Like, I don't think that there's anything necessarily like GoFundMe. It kind of, I guess, yeah, kind of, it's a great idea, Andy. But to your point, though, more importantly, on like the business component, yeah, I would say if once they stop working with that company, if they stop contributing, they're not going to lose access to the funds. But until someone else goes in and starts adding those funds, that they'll be maybe accruing some interest, but they'll be reliant on putting it in on their own dime.
Have you personally experienced any pushback from lawmakers? And if so, what's the issue?
Yeah, I think earlier, one of the questions of there have been concerns about it disincentivizing W-2 workers and increasing the amount of 1099s. That again, we haven't really seen that. I don't think there's really much to say that that's really happening. We've also, there are some folks who would argue they think that this needs to be mandated. They think that this should be something required of businesses to do. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of the free market aspect, of voluntariness of letting these parties engage in it and work out that deal themselves. And yeah, I think those have been the biggest concerns that we've really seen, aside from just some maybe lack of understanding like how this works. Because another thing I didn't mention, but I think is probably good to clarify, is this doesn't create any sort of government program. It doesn't add any new spending or anything like that. This is simply just leveling the playing field so that more businesses can engage. And I think there have been some questions about like, well, how much are they actually putting in? Is it really a notable amount that these workers are receiving? That kind of gets back into the question of, well, if you only have two major players or one major player, then they're kind of the ones setting the rate, and it's going to stack. Whereas if you open up the door and allow more engagement, then there's going to be more competitive rates. You're going to be able to see more innovation on how to deliver these benefits or how they make the arrangements themselves. But I would say those have been the major questions or areas of pushback that
It's possible that you see God to interact with the processor, like sending invoices in books or anything like that, so that the agents are not.
I'm not sure actually. I can't say because I'm not sure how Stride and Rocket Med. Well, Rocket Med is still. I don't believe that they didn't actually start implementing this yet. Stride, I don't know if that is part of how they distribute it on like an automated sort of situation. It might be, but I couldn't say for sure personally.